that there are changes now and that they can no longer use their own subjective biases towards DEI and ESG and other things in supervising the banks is also a critical component of bank regulation.
I agree completely. And as you know, Vice Chair Bowman is actually a former bank supervisor, so she's very well placed to make that happen.
And I realize that she as vice chair is more directly involved in bank supervision. I hope that you will use your role to punctuate the importance of those changes within the bank supervision function at the Fed.
We're going to have to move on.
Thank you.
I'm assuming your answer is yes. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Chair Powell, and welcome to the committee. So Chair Powell, a few months ago, you issued a warning about the trajectory of our national debt. Speaking at a New York Times event, you said the U.S. federal budget is on an unsustainable path. The debt is not only at an unsustainable level, but the path is unsustainable, and we know that we have to change that. Would you still agree that that is true?
Yes, that's the one thing that I would always say, and that my predecessors have said, and that's the kind of the only thing we say about fiscal policy.
Exactly. And I would agree with that at a time when Americans are struggling to figure out how to afford their lives and have low confidence in the economy. To add to the deficit now, as the big beautiful bill does, just strikes me as unsustainable. Now, I'm not asking you to moderate between Republican and Democratic policy differences on the big beautiful bill, but would you agree that the big beautiful bill adds to the deficit based on the data that you've seen?
I'm just not going to comment on the reconciliation.
Okay. Well, I will just point out to my colleagues that the CBO says that it adds to the deficit. The Joint Committee on Taxation says that it adds to the deficit. The Yale Budget Lab says that it adds to the deficit. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says that it adds to the deficit. The Penn-Wharton budget model says that it adds to the deficit. And even some of my Republican colleagues, Senator Johnson, Senator Paul, say that it adds to the budget. And as Senator Johnson says, it's wrong and immoral. So I appreciate that you won't comment on any of this, but let me just ask you an economic question. Can you talk a bit about what impact a rising deficit has on our goal of lowering costs for Americans, especially in the Trump tariff environment that we are in right now?
I'm sorry.
What impact does a rising deficit have on our goal of lowering costs for Americans, particularly when we are in this Trump tariff environment, the unpredictability of that?
So I think it's likely that when markets are pricing longer-term Treasury securities, there's something baked into that in the market's thinking about interest rates. What should be the appropriate interest rate? But it's hard to unpack that with any precision.
These are factors that have lots of interplay between one another.
Yes.
Yes. And Chair Powell, could you just comment briefly about the sort of the potential risks of stagflation, where we have slower growth and higher inflation? I know this is something that the Fed guards against, and could you just comment a bit on the risks of that and what it means for regular Americans trying to afford their lives?
So we're not seeing that now.
Yeah.
It isn't really the base case that that's what we're going to see. But of course, that's a very difficult thing because, a stagnant economy wants more stimulus, but an economy with more inflation wants less stimulus. So It puts the central bank in a hard place. We've warned of it, but it's honestly not something that we're facing or that we expect to face. But it's something we're monitoring is what's happening.
Thank you. I want to follow up on a question I asked you the last time you were before the committee. I asked about the impact of severe weather events, otherwise known as climate change, on home insurance costs. And you testified that, I think you said, if you fast forward over 10 or 15 years, there are going to be regions of the country where you can't get a mortgage because of the, can't get a mortgage because of the impact of the challenges of insurance companies just not being able to provide that. Since February, when I asked you that question, home insurance rates have continued to climb. A recent analysis about climate risk from First Street found that financial burdens from severe weather are driving up household costs and triggering increased mortgage defaults. Now it's at about 8% now, but they project that by 2035, 30% of all foreclosure losses would be related to climate impacts, which is like pretty stunning. Now, I realize this is a complicated issue because insurance is regulated primarily at the state level, though there are exceptions. Flood insurance and terrorism insurance are exceptions. But I wonder if you would comment on this. I'm thinking a lot about what impact this has on housing costs, which is a big component of inflation and a place where housing costs are rising higher than the general inflation rate right now.
Many things are driving up housing costs.
Yes, that's true.
It's of course mortgage rates, but it's also zoning costs and things like this for properties that are near the water. Particularly, for example, we spend some time down in Florida. Property insurance just gets more and more and more expensive, and to the point where it also almost makes sense to self-insure, and that's because of just big losses. Companies are just putting that in their models, and they're charging what they need to to charge to make a return. And if they can't get that, then they'll leave that state. So that seems to be what's happening.
I know I'm out of time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
You're always polite. So,
Minnesota
gave her 22 seconds. Sis. Thank you,
That's why
ma'am.
they call me the Velvet Hammer, sir.
I didn't say that you weren't harsh as well. You're just nice when you do it. Like just right now. See, Senator Moreno remind me not to give Tina a compliment in the middle of the back.
Chairman Powell, just want to make certain I understand this correctly. Control inflation and maximize employment. That's it. Two things, correct?
Yes.
So let's take one at a time. Maximize employment. Do you care if every American makes minimum wage or makes a livable wage? Is that something that factors into your thought process? In other words, we have full employment, but most Americans are on substandard wages. Does that change your calculus?
Does it change my what?
Calculus. In other words, is it full employment is full employment? Every American has a job, but they're making minimum wage versus having a family sustaining wage. Does that matter to the Federal Reserve?
It would matter to the country a lot.
I'm saying, does it matter to the Federal Reserve when you're making your decision?
Honestly, we don't really have the tools to affect that.
Right. So it doesn't factor in. Now that's different than us. The people of this country elect us to make certain that their wages are higher than inflation. And by the way, let the records show that real wages are up this year. So we've done that, not the Federal Reserve. Second piece of it is, let's talk about inflation first.
Well, we've helped control inflation, which is part of that.
We're going to jump right into the inflation conversation. There's different kinds of inflation. There's different causes. There's not witnesses to inflation. There's key actors to inflation. Would you agree?
Sure.
Okay. So let's talk about the actors. Did you comment during COVID lockdowns that was a bad idea, meaning that you're shutting down the entire economy? It's not a button. I hit the button, you can hear me. It's on and off. COVID wasn't that. We just shut down the economy. Any comments on that?
Of course not.
Okay, so you didn't comment on that. Vaccine mandates, something that my Democrat colleagues loved. If you don't get the vaccine, you're a terrible human being. You can't go to work. In fact, Joe Biden was overruled by the Supreme Court because he said that if you work in a company with more than 100 employees and you don't get vaccinated, the company has the ability to fire you, unless you prove that you're negative on COVID. That obviously is a supply chain shock. Wouldn't you agree? If I'm running an assembly line and now I have to put my people 6 feet apart and now I have people quitting or not coming to work or I have to fire them, that's a supply chain shock. Wouldn't you agree?
I mean, it's a medical thing that you...
No, but it's a supply chain shock.
George Washington.
I'm not asking you to make a medical decision. I'm asking you to make a Fed decision on inflation.
Way outside anything we would come.
But it affects inflation because supply...
It didn't.
Are you saying that supply chain shocks don't affect inflation?
They do, but that
okay, they do.
Didn't.
So that's clearly one. If you ban the export of liquid natural gas, which is going to cause the commodity price to go up, would that supply shock not also cause inflation?
Potentially could.
Yeah. So, and now the ranking member loves to talk about billionaire corporations, that are going to get away with paying taxes, right? Who pays corporate taxes? Like, who pays it? Is it like some obscure Wizard of Oz character behind the curtain that is a corporate entity that pays taxes? Who pays taxes?
I mean, ultimately, it's shareholders and customers.
So it'd be, I'm going to read you a line. You tell me this is accurate. On taxes, it's not possible to know in advance precisely how the cost will be shared for taxes. I added
Correct.
that.
I would
But it is highly likely that consumers will pay a meaningful share. Meaning if the ranking member has her way, let's just tax corporations at 100%. Why not? Be fantastic, right? Oh, nobody would want to start a company, but that aside, that cost would be added to consumer products, correct?
A tax or a tariff? What are you talking about now?
If the income tax for American corporations goes up, they will share that tax burden with their consumers. True or false?
Yeah, ultimately.
Yeah. So then taxes do raise inflation, but you don't comment on.
I mean, they haven't.
And you don't.
That's
But you
just
don't.
not true.
I got
empirically, it's not true.
The chairman's going to beat me up in 56 seconds. So, but you sent me a very nice letter, which I appreciate. And it says the Federal Reserve plays no role in commenting on trade policy. So you don't comment on supply shocks. You don't comment on tax policy, which clearly affects inflation. You don't comment on demand pull. You just said now that we should forgive student debt. Why is a person that goes to Harvard, that gets a gender studies major, pays Harvard obscene amounts of money because professors are grossly overpaid there? Is that person better than a working class Ohioan that is a plumber but can't afford a car because interest rates are too high and car prices have gone up? Why is that person? Why don't we forgive that person's car loan instead of forgiving their student loan? But you don't comment on that. You comment on tariffs. So I'm going to just show you.
I don't comment on tariffs at all. Actually, I comment on
only
inflation.
commented on tariffs. You've
I'm
only
not commenting on the
tariffs.
wisdom of tariffs.
Look, the chairman's over there in the conversation. I'm going to show you a chart here. This is car prices.
I'm
This
paying
is-
attention. However,
This is car prices since this year. Car prices are down. Car prices are down. Inflation in America is down. We got elected by millions of voters. You got elected by one person. He doesn't want you to be in that job. And you are costing this government $400 billion a year by refusing to lower interest rates. Nobody in this chamber has that kind of power to have a $400 billion impact on this economy, on our deficit. And I just think that you should consider whether you're really looking at this from a fiscal lens or a political lens, because you just don't like tariffs.
Senator Warnock is next.
Thank you, Chair Scott. Thank you, Chair Scott, and thank you, Chair Powell. Good to see you. The United States national debt currently exceeds $36 trillion. Last year, we paid nearly $1 trillion in interest on the debt alone, more than the federal government spent on educating and feeding our children. Chair Powell, how does the Fed consider rising national debt levels during discussions about adjusting interest rates?
We really don't. We take fiscal policy as completely exogenous, and we look at the data that's coming in, but we don't. We're never going to take into account budget deficits and things like that.
Well, here is my concern. Maybe Congress should be thinking about it. The world is losing faith in America's ability to repay our debt. We have seen a sell-off in the bond market. The United States dollar has lost more than 10% of its value against the euro and pound, and is down against nearly every single major currency in the world. Back in May, Moody's downgraded the U.S. government's credit rating because of growing debt and sinking confidence in lawmakers' willingness to address this issue. Historically, high debt pushes up interest rates, slowing economic growth and setting up a dangerous debt cycle where both interest rates and debt continue to rise. Chair Powell, how does the size and the trajectory of the national debt affect the Federal Reserve's ability to manage inflation in good economic times and spur investment and hiring in slower economic times?
I'm happy to say that today, those things do not affect our ability to do our job. The concern really is that if we don't do something, then there will come a time at which it will be a problem, not for us, but for the country. But that at this time, it does not interfere in any way with our ability to do
that is a realistic concern in the future, given the rate of
in the future.
increasing debt. And it's something I'm concerned about. And maybe because it's in the future, maybe that's why, folks who have power, who sit in these jobs, aren't as concerned about it as perhaps the Congress should be. I'm concerned about it as a father of a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. I'm concerned that my Republican colleagues are planning to ram forward a bill that, according to the Congressional Budget Office, will increase the deficit by $4.2 trillion. So I want us to think about that. We're taking food out of the mouths of hungry children. This bill could cut as many as 16 million Americans off of health care. When we think about Medicaid, 71% of the Medicaid recipients in Georgia are children. So we're taking their health care, and then we're saying to these children that you'll have to deal with these trillions of dollars in debt one day. $4.2 trillion increase. Senate Republicans are trying to use a budget gimmick to claim the bill only costs a fraction of that by simply not counting things they don't want to count. If they don't like the math, they just change the formula. But the markets and those investing in our country don't care about these budget tricks. And I don't think it will help my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old when the bill comes due on this. They know the truth, and they will react based on the truth. The big ugly bill will put the United States on a disastrous fiscal path, and it will be catastrophic for our economy. Even worse, the big ugly bill is cutting people off of their health care, and for what purpose? To give tax cuts to the wealthiest. So this is an interesting moment for me, for someone who didn't know I'd end up in politics, or just paid attention to politics over the years. They're getting ready to create a whole lot of pain for a lot of people. And the question is, for what purpose? To give billionaires a tax cut. I think we ought to work together to prioritize extending tax cuts for the working class. We shouldn't be cutting their health care. We ought to save the country trillions of dollars by not giving more tax breaks to the richest Americans. And if we try to work together, we can save our economy from this disaster and still protect working families from a tax hike. I believe in tax cuts. I think working class Americans ought to give them, ought to receive them. And we ought not be burdening our children with all of this debt. With that, I yield, and the chairman should take note that the Baptist preacher is done with 3 seconds left.
And the people said amen. Okay. Senator Haggerty.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Warren, for holding this meeting. And Chairman Powell, it's good to see you here again. Chairman Powell, I want to talk with you about inflationary and deflationary trends in our economy and how they impact your thinking. I understand, based on your testimony and recent statements, that you're acutely sensitive to the inflationary risks of our administration's trade policy. And though I note that it's not the Fed's responsibility to attempt to steer or to directly offset that policy in any way, I look at that. I look at your perspective, but I also look at many of the other developments in our country that I think present the opposite risk, which is a disinflation risk. And let me dig into this a bit. We're witnessing artificial intelligence adoption at breakneck speed. That's going to bring about productivity gains in nearly every aspect of our economy. We're about to pass a tax bill. That tax bill is going to encourage capital expenditures and long overdue upgrades to our manufacturing capacity, again, increasing productivity. And if you think about the concerted effort that's being undertaken by our federal government right now to reduce waste and bloated, unproductive government payrolls, all of these point to disinflationary productivity gains. So given the competing sources of uncertainty that we're talking about, it feels to me like the Fed's far more focused on tariffs and the inflationary impact of tariffs than on the deflationary impact of the points I just mentioned. So if uncertainty around tariffs is the primary reason that impacts your thoughts, I mean, how do you counter, how do you bring into account these disinflationary trends that I've just mentioned?
So we do look at the overall picture, and that's actually what's been happening is services inflation's been coming down, and that's been covering what we see so far, small increases in goods inflation. I would also mention a factor that you didn't mention on your list, which is regulation, which is an area which could also be over time disinflationary.
Yeah.
So We get that. I
Deregulation.
mean, I try to say that it's the broad sweep of policies and the broader economy that matters for inflation. I get asked about tariffs a lot, and that's the one where all forecasters are expecting, a significant increase between now and the end of this year. We don't know how big it's going to be. We don't know when it's going to come, but it's just something that we're waiting to see more information on so we can make a better decision on interest rates. That's all it is.
Well, I hear the discussion about not knowing the magnitude and the timing of the trade talks and the resulting tariffs that will ensue. It does seem to me that there's a bias toward viewing this as more inflationary than deflationary. And I'd like to ask you this. If Ambassador Greer is successful at bringing the trade deals together soon and alleviating that uncertainty, what would that do to your perspective on rates? Would that put you in a position to think more aggressively about lowering rates?
Yes, potentially it would. I mean, really, it's reducing uncertainty would help, and also just what's going to be the final tariff rate and getting that settled. And I think that's the path we're on.
I think that's welcome news. I think the markets will welcome that as well, because I do believe that we're on the path, as you're about to say, of having some significant resolution in trade uncertainty. We've lived in an unbalanced world for years, where the United States has had the lowest tariff barriers in the world, and other nations have taken advantage of that. Jameson Greer and this team, Scott Besson and his team, the president, everyone is making a concerted effort to fix this. So I'm looking forward to that. One other area I wanted to touch on, because it's touching close to home, and that is legislation that this committee has just passed out and that we've just passed in the Senate. It has to do with the Genius Act. We just passed it last week, and it provides an urgently needed regulatory framework for payment stablecoins, and it requires that they're backed one-to-one by cash or short-dated U.S. Treasuries. Over the last 5 years, the total value of outstanding stablecoins has increased from approximately $4 billion to over $2 billion today. One market participant has predicted that if a framework like the Genius Act is adopted, total issuance of dollar-pegged stablecoins could reach nearly $4 trillion by the end of the decade. So I wanted to get your perspective again, Mr. Chairman, of what impact would this new source of demand for bills have on the yield curve? And in particular, what impact would it have on short-term rates?
So more demand is going to have a tendency to drive down rates. I don't really have a sense of how big that effect would be, of course. And let me just say that it's a great thing that we're making progress toward a stablecoin framework.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't agree with you more. The direction clearly is that it's going to drive rates down. I think it's very positive for the economy, positive for our cost of borrowing as a nation. And I appreciate your response there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here. I want to follow up on a question from Senator Warner about data deterioration. I'm concerned about that as well. That the Trump administration, I'm watching as they've ended dozens of research studies that business and government leaders rely on. So my question to you, are there specific research projects that the Bureau of Labor Statistics provided that they no longer do provide, that the Federal Reserve researchers cannot replicate on their own or through other sources?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
That doesn't mean they don't exist, but mainly it's the regular data they supply. And as you know, they've cut back on the size of that survey.
Right. So I would hope as we move forward, and not just in today's hearing, but if there is some other data or you're relying on data that you're not getting, or there's now another source for that data, I would please share that with the committee. Thank you.
Yes.
During the Biden administration, the Federal Housing Finance Agency and the Federal Reserve worked together to improve access to the discount window for banks. What is the status of that collaboration with the FHFA?
I can't speak to the FHFA. I can speak to the fact that we're really looking carefully at modernizing the discount window and making.
But we're not there yet.
No, it's going to be. This is a project that will take some time. It's the discount window needs to be updated and refreshed from a technological standpoint so that people can access it readily and that kind of thing. It's still a little bit behind the age in that respect.
Do you have a time frame that you're looking at to?
I'll get back to you. It's something we've been working on hard.
Or is there a funding impediment that is also addressing this?
No.
So, okay, if you could.
We're moving ahead with it. I'll come back to that.
Thank you. In March, the Federal Reserve, together with the FDIC and OCC, announced that you all intend to repeal the 2023 Community Reinvestment Rule, Reinvestment Act proposed rule. I prefer the proposed rule as it would better address the needs of states like Nevada that don't have headquarters of large banks. How will you ensure that the new CRA guidance improves access to financial services, to loans, to investments in underserved rural and tribal communities?
So I think in March, we announced that we're putting out for comment really a proposal to withdraw the proposed guidance, which had been the subject of litigation. And in the meantime, we're going back to the old CRA rules. And I think that's where we will be. I don't have anything more in terms of what we might change with respect to those old rules, but that's where
So
we
the
are.
default are the old rules,
Yes.
and those may be
CRA as it existed before this
Yeah.
proposal, which actually never took effect.
right. Okay, that's helpful. Community banks benefited from high deposits during the pandemic. Since then, the net interest margin for community banks has fallen. What specific challenges do you see for community banks, if any?
Community banks, are very important. We want a banking system that has all different sizes and shapes of banks, and community banks are absolutely critical. They know what's going on in communities and in a way that the big banks can't possibly. So they're a critical part of our infrastructure, and I think they've been under pressure because, frankly, regulatory costs fixed costs of regulation have gone up. We try not to contribute to that. The number of banks has been going down pretty steadily. And that's not something we're trying to foster, but it's a sort of long run trend of really the last 30 years. So we try not to add to what is a secular trend because we think they're important.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Ms. Chairwoman, I yield my time.
Who's up next? Senator Britt.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. Chair Powell, thank you for being here with us today. I want to start just by echoing the comments of Senator Cortez Masto when it comes to community banks. Obviously, believe that community banks and credit unions, financial institutions that serve everyday Americans and main streets across the great state of Alabama and our country are so critically important to people being able to actually achieve the American dream. And want to make sure, I know we've talked about this the last few times that you've been in front of us. We've talked about the rewrite of Basel III. We've talked about long-term debt. We've talked about Reg II. We talked about a ton of things and talked about my concern that no one was looking at the cumulative impact of those things and the trickle-down effect. I just want to get a commitment from you that as you are reviewing rulemaking across the board, that you will consider and make sure to make the perspective of the smallest U.S. banks and non-financial industries like the ag sector who did not maybe have a seat at the table in previous administrations, but give them a seat at the table and make sure that you're thinking about the impact on those individuals and the people they serve.
I'm happy to make that commitment.
Thank you so much, Chair Powell. I also want to talk to you about an issue that has been brought up briefly today by another colleague of mine, but that is about childcare. So when we look at the childcare crisis in this country, we know that our economy loses about $122 billion a year because of affordability and accessibility, reliability, if you will, of childcare. It is said that anyone who has a child between the ages 0 and 5 actually spends 22% of their income on childcare. We have done the studies and looked at the numbers, and 59% of stay-at-home and or part-time working parents say that they would like to re-enter the workforce, but that affordability or accessibility is an impediment to do that. As we are looking to build back America, as we are looking to create opportunity and bring those things into fruition, would you agree that taking a look and being able to address, not asking you to comment on any specific proposal, but addressing some of the shortfalls related to accessibility and affordability of childcare would have a positive long-term impact on the economy?
So I think there's quite a bit of research showing exactly that, and we really saw it during the pandemic. As I think you know and pointed out, it's not an issue that we play a role on, but clearly it would contribute. Childcare would contribute to participation in the labor force by many.
Absolutely. And as Alabama looks, we look at our labor participation rate. It is 5 points lower than the national average. We continue to look to ways to get people re-engaged in the workforce and know that addressing this head on will help us be able to achieve that. So thank you so much, Chair Powell. I look forward to continuing to work to get that done. So there has been some angst vocalized about the reconciliation bill and the president's trade policies. And from my perspective, much of that skepticism is both unfair and premature. Market resiliency and recent economic data actually continues to reflect confidence in the U.S. economy. Look at the recent Treasury auction, which was notably successful and saw stronger than expected demands for 30-year bonds and stable, even slightly declining yields. To me, this demonstrates that investors still view the U.S. debt as an attractive asset, regardless of the ongoing policy discussions and debates and forging a pathway forward. And those fundamentals of the economy, actually remain quite strong. Chair Powell, would you agree that the components of our economy actually remain quite strong? And how does the Fed consider this type of strong auction performance in the context of your market expectations and monetary policy discussions?
As you point out, the Treasury market is working fine just now. Liquidity is adequate, and bond prices are responding to economic events, and so bond market's in good shape. In terms of the strength of the economy, I would strongly agree. The labor market's in a solid place. The economy's growing. Inflation is in a pretty good place, come much closer to 2%. So it's a very solid economy. We are watching the labor market very closely, as we always do. And a couple of things in particular. One is just a very low hiring rate, which goes with a low layoff rate. But if we were to start to see layoffs, we would see unemployment go up quickly, and so we're watching that carefully. But the labor market has remained solid, and I would agree with your overall characterization.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, ma'am. Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for coming before us today. You've often said in the past that when it comes to monetary policy, that it works with a lag, right? That this is something that you're having to try to assess the data that's before you.
Right.
I'm thinking about this because we have the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC 5-year review, and you were talking about tariffs and the uncertainty of this moment. So I guess I just wanted to ask you, how do you balance sort of assessing between more of the backwards looking data that you're able to, look at more tangibly in that way, but also addressing sort of forward looking models to try to understand where things are heading?
That's really the challenge that all forecasters have. And, really monetary policy needs to be forward looking. At the same time, we need to be humble about our how hard it is to forecast. So particularly at times of high uncertainty, which I would say I would include now, you really want to look at the real data and take signal from that, and not be too brave about what your forecast might be, because it's going to be highly uncertain.
So you're saying that in times of greater uncertainty, in some ways that makes you more interested in the backwards looking data to sort of guide you?
Well, I'd almost flip it around. Yes, but I'd almost flip it around and say at a time like that, you don't want to be giving a lot of forward guidance, and you don't want to be acting as though you have a lot of certainty about the path forward. It makes sense to move more slowly in most situations where there's more uncertainty. There are situations where it would not make sense to move slowly, but in most cases, you'd want to move more slowly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I talked to some of my constituents back home. There's this one conversation I had that has really stuck with me, where, a woman was telling me that, there's so much uncertainty right now in the world and certainly in her life that she says it's hard for her to even breathe sometimes. She just feels this kind of weight upon her chest. I've thought about that a lot, because I try to think through what can we do to try to alleviate that concern, alleviate that anxiety for people. But you can see it. I mean, right now, whether it's about what's unfolding in the Middle East and the fragility of what comes next. When I look at this reconciliation bill before us in the Senate, I do worry not just about the deficit, as some of my colleagues have mentioned, but about the potential of significant job loss that we're seeing, whether in the healthcare industry, whether in the energy industries. And certainly when it comes to tariffs, as you said, trying to think through what comes next in terms of whether deals are struck and at what levels. Are you taken into account that by sort of an issue-based level, or like, are you looking at sort of the global instability in terms of the different crises that are out there? Is that factoring into how you're thinking about when we're talking about legislation here? I know you're not going to go into the policy per se, but if there's a potential for significant job disruption, is that something that you're looking into as you're forecasting?
Yes. We obviously pay great attention to global events and in an effort to understand what's going on in the economy globally, because that does matter for our economy. So we pay close attention to all of those things and track them. Ultimately, though, we're looking at the U.S. economy and what are the fundamental drivers here, and then making a judgment based on all of that. And mainly, this is a big economy, and we're geographically separated from most of the other big economies in the world. So we have a smaller external sector than most of the all the European economies, for example. So we're really looking at the U.S. and what's happening here.
I wanted to ask you because, in central banks in other countries, including Bank of England and European Central Bank, they've begun modeling the potential macroeconomic effects of artificial intelligence. They're thinking about how they can use AI to be able to do some of the forecasting, to think through what comes next. I guess I wanted to get a sense of what the Federal Reserve is thinking in terms of similar work in the AI space.
We have lots of people doing work on AI and more than that, even monitoring research that's going on everywhere in the world. And, speaking of uncertainty, it's very clear that it has the potential to make really dramatic changes in our economy, in our workplace, in the jobs of workers, in the way companies work, and all of those things. But it honestly, there's a tremendous uncertainty about the timing of that and what the ultimate consequences will be and what the medium-term consequences will be.
I was wondering if the Fed is evaluating AI credit models and how that could potentially deepen disparity in credit access or violate fair lending standards. Is that something that you've looked into at this point? And
yes, absolutely.
Is the Fed looking to potentially affirm some industry standards on this?
It's something we've been aware of for a long time. There's a lot of research that's been done before generative AI came along. It's also just machine learning and technology generally. There are implicit biases that can appear. It's something we're very well aware of, and we do work with people to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Powell, can you talk about how our interest rates compare to other first-class countries around the world?
At the higher end.
And how does that affect the United States?
Well, I think that reflects a couple things. One is just that the U.S. economy has been stronger than others. I don't want to pick on any other nations, but many other nations have had much lower growth, now have lower inflation, and are, have pretty low growth, whereas the U.S. economy has really been the outstanding performer and remains that to this day. That implies somewhat higher rates.
So you say it's higher than most of first-class countries. Can you talk about historically where we've matched up with other countries?
Yeah, so let's just go back to when the pandemic hit, for example. We were we had very low rates during that era, but they were by far the highest in the developed world because the U.S. economy was the strongest. The European Union had negative rates. I think the Bank of England was at 75 basis points. I think we were at 2.4%. So we were meaningfully higher. And again, it was a time when we were our growth was higher and their growth was lower and their inflation was lower. Our inflation was fine, probably about the same as ours. So I think we've generally had a little bit higher rates than those countries because they have slower growth, older populations, lower productivity, those kind of things. We have the strongest economy in the world.
Globally gone up as well?
Sorry?
Have interest rates in those countries globally gone up as well?
Well, they went up.
The US?
All of those countries had their rates go up quite a bit during the global pandemic inflation, right? And as you know, many of them have been cutting their rates, and we had been too. And we'll at some point resume that. But we're 100 basis points lower than we were. I think if you take the EU and the Bank of England, they've both cut a little more than that.
How recently?
Recently, but but I think you probably read this, but they're either at or close to the end of their cutting cycles.
I know there's been a lot of talk today about deficits and the national debt, but how much does tax policy affect the economy in the U.S.?
I mean, it has big effects over time. It's really not something that drives what we do. It isn't, but I think, tax policy plays over the long run a huge role in incentivizing investment, which helps growth and things like that. I think it's very, very important over the long run, certainly more important than monetary policy.
Would a $4 trillion tax increase on middle-class Americans affect the economy?
Now here we're getting into the bill.
I understand. I'm asking how that would affect the economy and according to your data.
I'm trying to not make any direct comments on the bill today, if you'll forgive me. But I take your point.
Okay, I am trying to make a point, but there's got to be data that you sit on somewhere that would suggest that large tax increases would affect the economy, would stall economic growth in the U.S.
You could certainly get that out of a model if you wanted to. I mean, but again, I'm inevitably going to be commenting on the bill, right? If I answer that question, a lot of talk today about inflation. You've already agreed that inflation is down from where it was a year ago, and would you say steadily declining? Has been, yes. I more than agreed to it. I'm very pleased by it.
And all of the experts and so-called experts tell us that tariffs lead to inflation. But you seem to have suggested already that inflation is, if not under control, close to being under control.
So inflation's in a really good place. It is definitely in a good place. And, we have a forecast, and so does, by the way, every other, brand name forecaster in the country, which is very similar to ours, that there will be some inflation from tariffs coming. Not yet, but over the course of the coming months. And I think it's reasonable to expect that because someone has to pay. This is hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs we're taking in. Some of that's going to fall on the consumer. Not all of it's going to fall on foreign manufacturers. And that's the only insight we have. And we're just kind of wanting to see more data on that before we move. One
final question about data. Our trade deficits with China, the EU, Canada, and Mexico have all significantly dropped recently. What does the data tell us about that?
Well, I think that's
how that would affect inflation.
How it would affect inflation. I don't know that it has implications for inflation, but it obviously reflects the tariffs. I think recently you've seen Chinese imports come down quite a bit.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thanks.
Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Warren. Chair Powell, welcome back. Inflation has come down meaningfully from its peak. And there are signs of moderation in the broader economy, but prices for rent and other essential services remain high, and the outlook is still uncertain. Wage growth remains strong, but productivity trends are mixed, and demand for places to live is high, but borrowing costs and material shortages are making it harder for builders to keep up, adding to the affordability pressures. And at the same time, while I know this is not something you would say, but at the same time, while our Republican colleagues are pushing for tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans that would expand the deficit, the administration's trade and immigration policies are also introducing uncertainty that may not yet be fully reflected in the economy. For families that I represent, the cost of living remains painfully high. Premature easing could have unintended consequences that undo the progress we've made. Later this year, the Fed will update its monetary policy framework to respond to today's inflationary environment. And after years of supply shocks, housing inflation, and fiscal volatility, I hope you will remain strengthened, that the Fed's ability to navigate the more uncertain economy. And as you undertake this update, can you talk about how you're adapting the framework to these realities while preserving the Fed's commitment to full employment?
I'd be glad to. So we made changes in the year 2020 to our framework, and those were meant to take on board the the special issues that a central bank faces during the era of extremely low interest rates, where rates were never very far from zero. In fact, we just barely got away from zero when we had to cut back to zero. And the feeling was very much that if we had any kind of a shock, we'd be back at zero for years on end again. And that's really not a good thing, because the economy can become very stagnant. So what's happened since then, the big thing is interest rates are back to much more normal levels historically. So our policy rate at 4.3% actually doesn't feel like it's particularly restrictive. So it's, in other words, rates have moved way back up. That means that the effective lower bound is less of a problem. It means that the changes we made in 2020 are less relevant. They're not completely irrelevant. So we're making modifications, which we'll be discussing inside of our committee between now and the next meeting and in the next meeting, that will return the forecast more to what it was before the 2020 cycle.
I know we had a chance to talk in the past about my focus on jobs and the economy and labor. And I want to follow up on Senator Kim's questioning, where the focus on the changing technology landscape and with artificial intelligence, generative AI, and just its impact on the economy and labor market. How would you describe AI's impact on the economy so far, and how is the Fed measuring it?
The effects of AI are probably not great at this time. Generative AI, and the question is, how great will they be, and how big will they be, and how quickly will that happen? And anyone who's been exposed to what AI is capable of has to be pretty stunned by what it's capable of. And this is even the early days too. What the experts tell us is that, in 2 years, these things that you're doing, that'll be nothing compared to what we can do in 2 years. So I think it has enormous capabilities to make really significant changes in the economy and the labor force. And it can either augment people's productivity, or it can replace people, or it can do a little bit of both. Right. But it's going to be something.
You preempted my question, actually. I saw a recent article, and a CEO of an AI company actually said AI could, quote, wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs and spike unemployment to 10 or 20%. And I think he said in like a matter of a year or two. Do you think this is a reasonable perspective, and how would AI-driven productivity gains or worker displacement affect how the Fed defines full employment?
I don't know whether that's, I'm not a person to say how quickly that will happen. What's happened before with technology is it just seems to take a long time to be implemented. There's the technology, what it's capable of, and there's what it actually does when implemented. That last phase has tended to take longer than people expect. Will it happen with AI? It probably will. But in terms of maximum employment, the Fed doesn't have the tools to really address the social issues and labor market issues that will arise from this. We don't have those tools. We just have interest rates, and we'll always be able to balance the labor market so that supply and demand are in balance. But things like what AI does and what other things do from the outside, we just have to take them as they come.
Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Chair, for being here. I didn't expect to talk about it, but since AI came up, first off, we need to welcome it, exploit it, and benefit from it. I've had my staff try and go back and look at some of the congressional hearings in the times of the Industrial Revolution and other instances where we've had these threats of displacement, and it worked out okay for us. But the key is this is a global competition, and other countries are going to implement it. It is going to drive down their costs, and it will make us less competitive if we don't meet the challenge and become the innovator. But the transition is very important to note. I want to talk about SLR for a minute. I think you all indicated the balance sheet's going to continue to shrink. We're not going to get to pre-COVID levels, which was, I think, somewhere around $4 trillion. I guess the question is, you guys expect to hold higher levels of central banks to hold higher levels of central bank reserves than we have in previous years. Do you agree with that?
I don't think we'll get all the way back to where we were, but we're still shrinking.
Is it fair to say that the SLR should be updated to reflect the evolving preference?
Yes.
Thank you. Fed now. It's cost $545 million. You know, Chair Powell, I've never really liked FedNow, so it's probably not a friendly question. But I spent $545 million to implement it now. I think you're expected to spend another $245 million in 2025. So the total price tag is $1 billion. As you know, the Money Control Act requires the Fed to cover all the direct and indirect costs actually incurred. So can you give me an idea of when we're going to see a fee structure that's going to generate and actually pay for this implementation, including the expected ongoing operational cost?
So you're right. That is our obligation under the law, is to have it be self-funding, and we have a period during which that's supposed to happen. Yeah. Uptake has been steady but not rapid, and usage has been. Is it your sense
that you're going to be able to get to that, and that the fee structure that you're going to need based on that take rate is going to be achievable?
I think it's probably still achievable. I am not 100% clear that we're going to achieve it very soon.
That'd be it. Yeah, that's what I'm concerned. And I wonder if that pricing is there, given private sector options, if you're ever going to be able to get there. So just an editorial comment. One thing I did want to mention, I'm excited to see some of my colleagues on the other side of the dais concerned about the debt. Because last time I checked, over the 4 years that President Biden was in office, we had the American Rescue Plan that cost us $2 trillion. We had the Inflation Reduction Act that cost us $1 trillion. And we had the PACT Act that many of my colleagues, I was one of 9 Republicans that didn't vote for it, that also cost us $1 trillion. So I'm excited to see that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to get serious about spending within our means. I did have a question, I think, on for my staff wanted to ask about, sorry, I just want to get my notes right. I actually wanted to go, I don't have it before me, but what's the current status in your view on Wells Fargo's capital requirements?
On their capital requirement? Well, I think you mean on the growth cap?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we voted unanimously to remove that after many years of having it in place. They did satisfy the requirements we'd put in place, and we removed the cap along with the other agencies.
And you think your fact-based decision, you stand by it?
I do.
Very good. Last thing is Walmart. I've got other questions I'll submit for the record, Chair, but Walmart on April 9th, I think, withdrew their forward guidance. And they indicated the reason that they were doing that is there was uncertainty, and it seems to have been timed somewhat with the uncertainty around trade. So I would just suggest for my colleagues, I don't know if you can respond to this or not. I won't ask you a tax question, but I really want to. But I know what your answer is going to be. You're a good dancer. I think that it is fair to say that if there is going to be a correlation to increasing prices, and Walmart having made the decision to withdraw their guidance is probably the best testament that they know that they may have to deal with cost and maybe inflationary uncertainties. Would you characterize that as maybe a likely reason that they withdrew their guidance?
It might be. I saw that they had. I didn't have a chance to go back and check why.
Well, if you tease through the language, it seems almost certain that they think that some of their input costs were going to go up, and they need to manage their margins. So I'm just telling my colleagues, we just need to be realistic that if you have a major household name withdrawing guidance because of uncertainty, they've got a lot of experts that probably are suggesting there may be some inflationary risk. We haven't realized it yet, but I think we all need to keep our eyes open and not look past it so that we can manage it if it comes to pass. I don't think that there should be a problem with that.
Thank you.
Now, the last thing that I just want to mention is that you can't respond to this, but I will tell you, if the Democrats succeed in preventing us from avoiding the biggest tax hike in the history of this country, it is going to cause great damage to the people who can least afford it. You don't get to respond to this one, but folks.
Senator Also Brooks is next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize she was here.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
We were
but we need to open that. We need to be open. We need to understand that you will have something to fix if we fail to continue the tax cuts.
Thank you, sir. Senator Also Brooks.
Thank you so much. First to Chair Scott and Ranking Member Warren, thank you so much for hosting today's hearing. We thank you also, Chairman Powell, for your tremendous service to our country. I very much enjoyed the meeting that we had earlier this year and look forward to working with you. Many of my colleagues today have been listening to this hearing, have rightly discussed concerns regarding how tariffs are affecting consumers and businesses. And I'd like to highlight a specific business in Maryland that encapsulates the harm that I believe this administration is inflicting, but also the resilience of a proud Maryland small business. Bay Dog is a successful pet brand based on Kent Island, one founded by Barton O'Brien, who's a Marine veteran who served 3 combat tours overseas. Mr. O'Brien has calculated that if he were to make his products in the United States, he would have to raise his prices 400% just to break even. The tariffs, he believes, are a burdensome tax that could put companies like his out of business. But the damage doesn't stop there. Bay Dog is sold in thousands of other brick and mortar stores across the country, all locally owned small businesses who similarly have to raise prices or lose sales to pay the president's tax. Mr. O'Brien started planning for this last summer when President Trump started talking about tariffs during the campaign. He stockpiled inventory and has committed to keeping his prices stable this year. But what Bay Dog is asking is, what is he to do if the tariffs are in place next year? Mr. O'Brien has calculated that he won't have to just raise prices. He'll likely have to cut his staff to stay in business. So Chair Powell, there are 34 million small businesses in America, 1 for every 10 people. And if small businesses like Bay Dog have to lay off staff or go out of business altogether, what will that do to unemployment in this country, and what effect will that have on the broader economy?
I mean, just mechanically, I don't want to comment on particular tariff policies, but sure, if companies go out of business, then that'll hurt employment and activity.
And what we will see is, of course, and we have so many small businesses, what we're facing now is that very prospect, is that we're going to have so many. And we believe that, the inflation caused by these tariffs will really have a very negative impact. And if this is the case, what would this mean for American workers?
Well, the other thing is, I think the tariffs are still in motion. It's premature to say exactly where they're going to land. So we're kind of withholding judgment until we see more. That's kind of where we are. We haven't made a decision to do anything. It's just we want to see more. And the situation evolves day by day, month by month. So.
Okay. Well, in another question, in our meeting and in your most recent monetary policy report, you spoke of the long-term challenge of housing supply not meeting demand. And I look at this issue the same way I did as county executive, where I really fought hard to leverage private and public sector dollars to bring more housing to communities that needed it. Maryland has a shortfall of nearly 100,000 homes, and the pathway to build wealth is therefore narrowing. So studies have estimated that of the over $200 billion invested annually in housing in recent years, only a fraction supports affordable homes for working class families. So would you speak to the need to better incentivize private investments into affordable housing construction? I'm working with the private sector and nonprofit stakeholders on legislation now, but just wanted to know if you could comment on that.
So I would say this: interest rates are slightly restrictive at this point, modestly restrictive, and that is weighing on economic activity in the housing market sector. But you're really talking about a different problem. It's not one that the Fed can really address, and that is we have a longer run housing shortage. So many other advanced economy countries have this too, and it's not our tool. Our tools don't really work to affect that. It's really elected people, and you saw this as county executive. It's things that the legislature can do that can really address that. Not us. It's not about interest rates.
All right. Well, now I understand one other issue. The Fed is evaluating the leverage ratio rules regarding the amount of capital required to be held by banks to withstand unforeseen risks. And I'm hoping you can then provide some insight as to what potential changes this framework are meant to achieve. On the other hand, I understand that access to capital is paramount, particularly for communities I represent. So And I understand concerns that a change in these requirements could affect the resilience of the banking sector. Though I know you cannot speak to the specifics of the coming proposal, would you share some insights into what problem the proposed rulemaking is meant to solve? And are you concerned that it could lead to a deterioration of resilience of the banking sector?
I'd be glad to. So the idea behind it is that we want risk-based capital to be the binding capital requirement, because we want the binding capital requirement to be, we want banks to be sensitive to the risks that they're taking. If the leverage ratio is not risk sensitive, it treats every asset as equally risky. So if that's binding, then that interferes with banks' incentives to manage their risks and actually discourages banks from taking on relatively low risk activity. So we've always at the Fed wanted the risk-based capital to be the binding one and the leverage ratio to be the backstop. And so that's this proposal that we have that we're going to be meeting on in a couple of hours puts out for comment a proposal to restore the the backstop characteristics of the leverage ratio. We think it should make it will not in any way diminish the safety and soundness of the financial system, and it will allow for banks to undertake lower risk. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. For senators who wish to submit questions for the hearing record, those questions are due 1 week from today, Wednesday, July 2nd. Chairman Powell, you have 45 days from that day to submit your responses to questions for the record. Thank you for being here. This committee is adjourned.
Thank you.
In American history, how are Trump and Republicans paying for part of this $4 trillion in tax giveaways to billionaires? Well, by kicking 16 million people off their health care coverage, cutting food assistance for more than 2 million children, and raising monthly student loan payments.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi leads the International Day of Yoga celebrations from Visakhapatnam, says yoga is a system that takes us from me to we where inner peace becomes global policy. From the stairs of Sydney's Opera House to peak of Everest and sea's expanse, yoga unites the world beyond boundaries, background, and ability. India brings home 517 nationals from Iran under Operation Sindhu. Indian embassy in Iran will also help evacuate citizens of Nepal and Sri Lanka from Iran at the request of their governments. The 11th International Day of Yoga is being celebrated today with great enthusiasm across India and the world. Theme of Yoga Day is Yoga for One Earth, One Health, echoes India's vision of global wellness, highlights the deep connection between individual well-being and planetary health, echoing Indian ethos of Sarve Santu Niramaya, that is, may all be free from disease. President of India, Draupadi Murmu, took part in the 11th International Day of Yoga in Dehradun, the capital city of Uttarakhand. The program, organized at police lines, Dehradun, witnessed large number of people's participation. The governor of Uttarakhand, Gurmeet Singh, also participated in the celebrations. The president said, yoga is the art of living a healthy life, adopting which benefits the body, mind, and overall personality of a human being.
योग पूरी मानवता की साझा धरोहर बन चुका है। ये भारत की सॉफ्ट पावर का एक अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण उदाहरण है। योग की अंतर्राष्ट्रीय लोकप्रियता के अनेक प्रभावशाली उदाहरण हैं। योग का अर्थ जोड़ना। योग का अभ्यास व्यक्ति के शरीर, मन और आत्मा को जोड़ना है और स्वस्थ बनाता है। इसी प्रकार ये एक व्यक्ति को दूसरे व्यक्ति से, एक समुदाय को दूसरे समुदाय से और एक देश को दूसरे देश से जोड़ना काम भी कर रहा है। इसी उद्देश्य का ध्यान में रखते हुए 11वीं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय योग दिवस का थीम एक पृथ्वी एक स्वास्थ्य रखा गया है।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the 11th International Day of Yoga celebrations from Andhra Pradesh's Visakhapatnam, defining that yoga is for everyone, beyond boundaries, backgrounds, age, or ability. The theme for this year is Yoga for One Earth, One Health, which echoes India's vision of global wellness and reflects the integrated vision of well-being. The Yoga Day celebrations in Visakhapatnam was being held in a 26-kilometer-long corridor where more than 3 lakh people performed yoga together. Prime Minister Modi also released a commemorative postage stamp on the occasion of 11th International Day of Yoga 2025. Talking about the ongoing tensions across the world and global instability, Prime Minister emphasized on yoga's role in promoting peace.
दुर्भाग्य से आज पूरी दुनिया किसी न किसी तनाव से गुजर रही है। कितने ही क्षेत्रों में अशांति और अस्थिरता बढ़ रही है। ऐसे में योग से हमें शांति की दिशा मिलती है। योगा is the pause button that humanity needs to breathe, to balance, to become whole again. मैं विश्व समुदाय से आज के इस महत्वपूर्ण अवसर पर एक आग्रह करूंगा। Let this Yoga Day mark the beginning of Yoga for Humanity 2.0, where inner peace becomes global policy. जहां योग सिर्फ पर्सनल प्रैक्टिस न रहे, बल्कि ग्लोबल पार्टनरशिप का माध्यम बने, जहां हर देश, हर समाज योग को जीवन शैली और लोक नीति का हिस्सा बनाए, जहां हम मिलकर एक शांत, संतुलित और सस्टेनेबल विश्व को गति दें, जहां योग विश्व को टकराव से सहयोग और तनाव से समाधान की ओर ले जाए.
Explaining yoga as a great personal discipline, Prime Minister highlighted that yoga is a system that takes us from me to we.
The theme of this year's International Day of Yoga is Yoga for One Earth, One Health. This theme reflects a deep truth. The health of every entity on earth is interconnected. Human well-being depends on the health of the soil that grows our food, on the rivers that gives us water, on the health of the animals that share our ecosystems, on the plants that nourish us. Yoga awakens us to this interconnectedness. Yoga leads us on a journey towards oneness with the world. It teaches us that we are not isolated individuals, but part of nature. Initially, we learn to take good care of our own health and wellness. Gradually, our care and concern extend to our environment, society, and planet. Yoga is a great personal discipline. At the same time, it is a system that takes us from me to we.
On the occasion, Prime Minister Modi also met the participants at the venue. And while Prime Minister Modi was leading the main event of Yoga Day in Visakhapatnam, some 11,000 personnel from Eastern Naval Command, along with their family members, performed yoga on board Indian Navy ships and across the Vizag coastline. In solidarity with the citizens of Vizag and demonstrating commitment to holistic well-being, the naval personnel and their family members participated in the grand morning yoga session.
We're celebrating the 11th edition of International Day of Yoga with this year's theme, Yoga for One Earth and One Health, which resonates and complements the India's traditional belief of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. With yoga, we foresee the world growing healthier and stronger together.
Armed forces is synonymous to being physically fit, and yoga complements the traditional training that we do every day, and it also plays a crucial role in helping the naval personnel remain combat ready always, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Yoga integrated with the daily routine not only makes us boost our well-being, but also helps us making us more focused, efficient, and resilient.
जैसा योग अभ्यास करने के लिए ज़्यादा जगह और इक्विपमेंट का जरूरत नहीं है, एंड हम नेवी में शिप्स और सबमरीन में योग अभ्यास को आसानी से कर सकते हैं. हर हफ्ते हम योग अभ्यास करते हैं. इसमें हमारे फैमिली भी हमें मौका मिलने पर ज्वाइन हो जाते हैं.
नियमित योगा करने से शरीर, मन और भावना पर बहुत अच्छा प्रभाव पड़ता है. ये हमारे शरीर को मजबूत बनाता है, सहन शक्ति बढ़ाता है और तनाव को दूर करता है.
The Ministry of Culture marked the 11th International Day of Yoga by organizing yoga sessions at 100 tourist-based iconic destinations and 50 more cultural sites across the country. A grand celebration was held at the historic Mehrangarh Fort in Jodhpur, where Culture Minister Gajendra Singh Shekhawat performed yoga with other participants. The event was a remarkable fusion of history, culture, and yoga, giving out a message of peace to the world from the land of Rajasthan. The Pan-India initiative reinforced ministry's commitment to linking India's cultural legacy with wellness traditions of yoga. The Archaeological Survey of India, in collaboration with Ministry of Ayush, celebrated Yoga Day at Konark in Puri district of Odisha. The celebrations aim to promote the philosophy of balance within oneself and with the environment through India's ancient practice of yoga. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh celebrated 11th International Day of Yoga in Jammu and Kashmir's Udhampur. Speaking at the event, the minister said India has given the most influential scriptures to the world in the form of yoga.
भारत ने विश्व को शस्त्र नहीं शास्त्र दिए और योग ये हमारा सबसे प्रभावशाली शस्त्र है शास्त्र है जो न शोर करता है न दिखावा बस साइलेंटली दुनिया को बदलना है.
On the occasion of the International Day of Yoga, several Indian ministers took part in yoga sessions to promote health and wellness across the nation, demonstrating their commitment to holistic well-being. India's Minister of External Affairs, S. Jaishankar, and Minister of Corporate Affairs, Nirmala Sitharaman, performed yoga asanas as part of the celebrations. Joining in the initiative, Minister of Industry and Supply, Piyush Goyal, Minister of Education, Dharmendra Pradhan, also participated in yoga celebrations, symbolizing Indian government's effort to encourage citizens to adopt yoga as a way to maintain physical fitness and mental clarity in today's fast-paced lifestyle. The Information and Broadcasting Ministry of the Indian government celebrated International Day of Yoga on Saturday at the National Media Center in New Delhi. Secretary of Information and Broadcasting Ministry, Sanjay Jaju, led the yoga session. The program was part of nationwide celebrations of International Day of Yoga with the theme Yoga for One Earth, One Health. Secretary Sanjay Jaju highlighted the importance of yoga for physical and mental well-being.
We're very happy that all of us joined here today in the program which was broadcast live from Visakhapatnam, where our Honorable Prime Minister participated in the world's biggest yoga congregation. And all of us are very happy that yoga is not just allowing us to connect with our inner selves, but yoga is now also becoming a platform for us to connect with the rest of the world.
India's Sports Minister Mansukh Mandavia extended best wishes on International Day of Yoga. He urged everyone to perform yoga regularly, included in their everyday life, to stay fit and healthy.
योग एक वे ऑफ लाइफ है, योग एक जीवन शैली है, योग मेंटल और फिजिकल फिट रहने का मंत्र है, योग हमारी प्राचीन हमें विरासत में मिली हुई एक संस्कृति भी है.
On the 11th International Day of Yoga, Indian Army conducted yoga sessions from the world's highest battlefield, Siachen, to all terrains and climate conditions through the expanse of the country. International Day of Yoga 2025 witnessed enthusiastic participation from armed personnel, reflecting the Indian Army's enduring belief in yoga is excellence in action and its resolve to incorporate yoga into daily regime of its personnel across terrains, climates, and global duties. In Ladakh, International Day of Yoga was celebrated with great enthusiasm at the Kri Sultan Shu Sports Stadium in Kargil. The event began with yoga pledge, followed by mass yoga session attended by hundreds of yoga enthusiasts. Adding cultural vibrance to the event, artists of the Ladakh Cultural Academy, Kargil, in collaboration with North Zone Cultural Center, presented a colorful program showcasing the rich and diverse heritage of Kargil. Union Public Service Commission Chairman Ajay Kumar on Saturday took part in the International Day of Yoga celebrations at UPSC Bhavan in New Delhi. He said the theme of International Day of Yoga 2025 resonates with our theme of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. He spoke with Abhishek Mahajan of DD India.
Yes, to talk on International Day of Yoga, we have UPSC Chairman Mr. Ajay Kumar with us. Welcome, sir. Welcome to DD India. Appreciate you giving us your precious time, sir. What message do you want to give to the people? The world is celebrating International Day of Yoga today, and Prime Minister also said that humanity needs that pause. What message do you want to give to the people?
Yeah, first of all, my best wishes to everyone on the International Day of Yoga 2025. And, very aptly, we are celebrating this day with the motto of One Earth, One Health. It resonates with our theme of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And as being part of this whole exercise in UPSC, we are feeling very privileged, very proud. It's really nice to see that we are able to reclaim our heritage of yoga. And in today's world of stress and politics, I think yoga can be a big healer.
Yoga is the pause that humanity needs. That's what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said. Why is it important for people to do yoga?
I think yoga is about the overall balance in life, both physical, mental, and emotional. And if you look at it, most of our problems emanate from the kind of stresses that we go through, whether at an individual level or whether at a society level. If we can actually pervasively use yoga, we will increasingly find that many of the problems which seem so unresolvable will automatically melt down the differences and bring about a synergy and togetherness, a feeling of fraternity, and like we say, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for speaking with DD India. So UPSC Chairman Ajay Kumar clearly highlighting the role of yoga in our daily life. With cameraman Jay Shankar, this is Abhishek Mahajan in Delhi for DD India.
The Consulate General of India in Shanghai celebrated International Day of Yoga with great enthusiasm, highlighting yoga's universal appeal and its role in fostering harmony and health. Pratik Mathur, Consulate General of India in Shanghai, led the celebrations as thousands of yoga enthusiasts joined celebrations across cities in the eastern China region. In the heart of Tokyo, hundreds gathered today at the historic Shuji Hongwanji Temple to mark International Yoga Day. People from all walks of life came together to embrace the ancient practice that promotes harmony between body and mind. DD India correspondent Polomi Barman sends us the special report from the land of the rising sun.
As the sun rose over Tokyo, the spiritual calm of the Tsukiji Hongwanji temple was matched by the rhythmic breathing of over 2,000 people who gathered together to celebrate the 11th International Yoga Day. With the theme Yoga for One Earth, One Health, the event showcased the growing global appeal for this Indian tradition.
Today I had a very special experience with the yoga lesson. I recommend to do yoga because yoga protect our health, not only health but also mental health. It's very good for people.
The temple grounds turned into a sea of mats, demonstrating a striking symbol of collective mindfulness and shared intention. Yoga enthusiasts from different nationalities and backgrounds gathered to celebrate this special day.
I'm so happy to participate this event. I like the yoga, and I usually yoga, for example, morning or after lunch. So today, I'm so glad to take part in this event. Thank you so much.
The event became more than a celebration. It became a reminder that inner peace can ripple outwards, touching hearts across cultures and continents.
The embassy here has been proactively engaging with our Japanese friends to spread the message of yoga, one of harmony, peace, and also the well-being. And I think it has a huge impact. My estimate is that at least 8% of the people of Japan, a country of 120 million people, at least 8% practices yoga every day. But our target is big. We would like to make it, the number to grow to at least to the level of 80% of Japanese population. This is our target. We are working very hard. I'm very happy to see the large number of people coming and joining us here today to celebrate the International Day of Yoga in Tokyo.
Here at the historic Tsukiji Hongwanji Temple, the confluence of tradition, culture, wellness, and international friendship is on display. From deep breathing to deeper bonds, International Day of Yoga found a special spot in the heart of the land of the rising sun. This is Paulami Burman reporting from Tokyo for DD India.
An Indian mission in ASEAN, Jakarta, marked 11th International Day of Yoga at the ASEAN headquarters premises. Ambassador of India to ASEAN welcomed the enthusiastic yoga participants. During his remarks, the ambassador emphasized on the importance of yoga in everyday life, underlining this year's Yoga Day theme, Yoga for One Earth, One Health. Secretary P. Kumaran said in his remarks, yoga is a comprehensive instrument for physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being of one and all in harmony with the planet. On to some other stories now. Update on Operation Sindhu. The Indian embassy in Iran announced that it will evacuate citizens of Nepal and Sri Lanka from Iran at the request of their respective governments amid rising tensions between Israel and Iran. The embassy tweeted, and I quote, "On the request of governments of Nepal and Sri Lanka, the Indian embassy's evacuation efforts in Iran will also cover citizens of Nepal and Sri Lanka," unquote. The embassy also provided emergency contact numbers for citizens of Nepal and Sri Lanka. Those are the numbers on the screen. Meanwhile, so far, 517 Indian nationals from Iran have returned home under Operation Sindhu. External Affairs Ministry said that a special evacuation flight from Ashgabat, Turkmenistan, has arrived in New Delhi in early hours of Saturday. Under Operation Sindhu, the Indian Embassy in Tehran and Ministry of External Affairs coordinated efforts on the ground to bring back stranded nationals. That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan this QR code on the screen to download now. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lin. Namaskar. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Prime Minister Narendra Modi leads the 11th International Yoga Day celebrations from Visakhapatnam, declares yoga is for all. Ahead of OIC summit in Istanbul, Iran's Foreign Minister Arakshi accuses the US of being involved in the conflict from the start. India to evacuate Nepalese and Sri Lankan nationals from Iran amid escalating Israel-Iran conflict. A second direct flight carrying 310 Indian nationals from Tehran lands in Delhi. The 11th International Day of Yoga is being celebrated today with great enthusiasm across India and the world. This year's theme, Yoga for One Earth, One Health, echoes India's vision of global wellness. Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the 11th International Day of Yoga celebrations from Andhra Pradesh's Visakhapatnam, defining that yoga is for everyone beyond boundaries, backgrounds, age, or ability. The theme for this year is Yoga for One Earth, One Health, which echoes India's vision of global wellness and reflects the integrated vision of well-being. The Yoga Day celebrations in Visakhapatnam were held on a 26-kilometer long corridor where about 500,000 people performed yoga together. Prime Minister Modi also released a commemorative postage stamp on the occasion of the 11th International Day of Yoga 2025. And talking about the ongoing tensions across the world and global instability, the Prime Minister emphasized on yoga's role in promoting peace.
दुर्भाग्य से आज पूरी दुनिया किसी न किसी तनाव से गुजर रही है। कितने ही क्षेत्रों में अशांति और अस्थिरता बढ़ रही है। ऐसे में योग से हमें शांति की दिशा मिलती है। योगा is the pause button that humanity needs to breathe, to balance, to become whole again. मैं विश्व समुदाय से आज के इस महत्वपूर्ण अवसर पर एक आग्रह करूंगा। Let this Yoga Day mark the beginning of Yoga for Humanity 2.0, where inner peace becomes global policy, जहां योग सिर्फ पर्सनल प्रैक्टिस न रहे बल्कि ग्लोबल पार्टनरशिप का माध्यम बने, जहां हर देश, हर समाज योग को जीवन शैली और लोक नीति का हिस्सा बनाए, जहां हम मिलकर एक शांत, संतुलित और सस्टेनेबल विश्व को गति दे, जहां योग विश्व को टकराव से सहयोग और तनाव से समाधान की ओर ले जाए.
Explaining yoga as a great personal discipline, the Prime Minister highlighted that yoga is a system that takes us from me to we.
The theme of this year's International Day of Yoga is Yoga for One Earth, One Health. This theme reflects a deep truth. The health of every entity on earth is interconnected. Human well-being depends on the health of the soil that grows our food, on the rivers that gives us water, on the health of the animals that share our ecosystems, on the plants that nourish us. Yoga awakens us to this interconnectedness. Yoga leads us on a journey towards oneness with the world. It teaches us that we are not isolated individuals, but part of nature. Initially, we learn to take good care of our own health and wellness. Gradually, our care and concern extends to our environment, society, and planet. Yoga is a great personal discipline. At the same time, it is a system that takes us from me to we.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi also interacted with the participants at the venue after performing yoga with them. Now let's take a look at the highlights of the Prime Minister's mega yoga event held in the morning.
योग सभी का है और सभी के लिए है। योग का सीधा साधा अर्थ होता है जुड़ना, और ये देखना सुखद है कि कैसे योग ने पूरे विश्व को जोड़ा है। आज पूरी दुनिया किसी न किसी तनाव से गुजर रही, ऐसे में योग से हमें शांति की दिशा मिलती है। Let this Yoga Day mark the beginning of Yoga for Humanity 2.0, where inner peace becomes global policy. हम सब मिलकर योग को एक जन आंदोलन बनाएं, एक ऐसा आंदोलन जो विश्व को शांति, स्वास्थ्य और समरसता की ओर ले जाए, और जहां योगा फॉर वन अर्थ वन हेल्थ एक वैश्विक संकल्प बन जाए।
President of India, Draupadi Murmu, also took part in the 11th International Day of Yoga in Dehradun, the capital city of Uttarakhand. This program, organized at police lines in Dehradun, it witnessed a large number of people participating. And the governor of Uttarakhand, Gurmeet Singh, also graced the celebrations.
योग पूरी मानवता की साझा धरोहर बन चुका है। ये भारत की सॉफ्ट पावर का एक अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण उदाहरण है। योग की अंतर्राष्ट्रीय लोकप्रियता के अनेक प्रभावशाली उदाहरण हैं। योग का अर्थ जोड़ना। योग का अभ्यास व्यक्ति के शरीर, मन और आत्मा को जोड़ना है और स्वस्थ बनाता है। इसी प्रकार ये एक व्यक्ति को दूसरी व्यक्ति से, एक समुदाय को दूसरे समुदाय से और एक देश को दूसरे देश से जोड़ना काम भी कर रहा है। इसी उद्देश्य का ध्यान में रखते हुए 11वीं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय योग दिवस का थीम एक पृथ्वी एक स्वास्थ्य रखा गया है।
India's Home Minister Amit Shah participated in the Yoga Day celebrations in Ahmedabad on the occasion of International Yoga Day. Amit Shah performed yoga with local residents. He said that yoga has become a part of the daily routine of people all over the world. The Home Minister also added that yoga brings unity among mind, body, and brain. Meanwhile, over 2,000 yoga participants in Gujarat's Vadnagar, they have created history by clinching the Guinness World Record title for performing the Cobra pose in yoga, simultaneously setting a guideline that everyone had to do it for at least a minute each. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh celebrated the 11th International Day of Yoga in Jammu and Kashmir's Udhampur. Speaking at the event, the Union Minister said that India has given the most influential scriptures to the world in the form of yoga.
भारत ने विश्व को शस्त्र नहीं शास्त्र दिए, और योग ये हमारा सबसे प्रभावशाली शस्त्र है, शास्त्र है, जो न शोर करता है दिखावा बस साइलेंटली दुनिया को बदल रहा है.
Minister Rajnath Singh also took a jibe at Pakistan and said that through Operation Sindoor, India has conveyed a strong message to its neighbors that their strategy of inflicting harm through terrorism will no longer be successful.
साथियों, सीमा पार से भारत के खिलाफ केवल पहलगाम में एक आतंकी घटना को ही अंजाम नहीं दिया गया, बल्कि भारत की सामाजिक और सांप्रदायिक एकता को भी निशाना बनाया गया. हमने न केवल उनके मंसूबों को विफल किया है ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के माध्यम से, बल्कि ऐसी जवाबी कार्रवाई की कि पाकिस्तान को घुटने टेकने पड़े, और तब जाकर कहीं ऑपरेशन सिंदूर को हमने अल्प विराम दिया है. ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के माध्यम से हमने पाकिस्तान को बता दिया है कि आतंकवाद से भारत को हजारों घाव देने का उनका अभियान अब सफल नहीं होने वाला है.
The Information Broadcasting Ministry of the Government of India celebrated International Day of Yoga on Saturday at the National Media Center in New Delhi. The Secretary of Information Broadcasting Ministry, Sanjay Jaju, led the yoga session. The program was part of the nationwide celebration of International Day of Yoga with the theme Yoga for One Earth, for One Health. The Secretary, Sanjay Jaju, he highlighted the importance of yoga for physical and mental well-being.
We're very happy that all of us joined here today in the program which was broadcast live from Visakhapatnam, where our Honorable Prime Minister participated in the world's biggest yoga congregation. And all of us are very happy that yoga is not just allowing us to connect with our inner selves, but yoga is now also becoming a platform for us to connect with the rest of the world.
The lawns of Parliament House turned into a vibrant hub of wellness and unity as a special yoga session was organized to mark International Day of Yoga. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla participated in a group yoga session with MPs and members of the staff. Addressing the gathering, the speaker said that yoga is an ancient Indian practice followed by the entire world today, and he added that yoga contributes to the holistic development of an individual and enhances efficiency. The Ministry of Culture marked the 11th International Day of Yoga by organizing yoga sessions at 100 tourist-based iconic destinations and 50 more cultural sites across the country. A grand celebration was held at the historic Mehrgarh Fort, and this Mehrgarh Fort, I beg your pardon, in Jodhpur, where Culture Minister Gajendra Singh Shekhawat performed yoga with other participants. And the event was a remarkable fusion of history, culture, and yoga, giving the message of peace to the world from the land of Rajasthan. The Pan-India initiative reinforces the ministry's commitment to linking India's cultural legacy with the wellness traditions of yoga. As part of the ongoing Indo-French joint exercise, a military exercise, Shakti 8, which is going on in France, the contingents there participated in International Day of Yoga celebrations. It was conducted by trained yoga instructors from the Jammu and Kashmir Rifles Battalion representing the Indian Army. The session focused on correct postures, breathing techniques, and the holistic benefits of yoga for physical and mental well-being. The Indian contingent, the Indian contingent proudly led the celebration of International Day of Yoga in Mongolia during the multi-nation military exercise Khan Quest, organizing a rejuvenating yoga session for all participating nations. Yoga enthusiasts in Indonesia welcomed the International Day of Yoga with a number of events which brought thousands of participants to several venues across the country. Chandni Vasandani gives us a report.
Yoga for One Earth, One Health is the theme highlighted by the International Day of Yoga celebration in Indonesia. In the event in Jakarta, nearly 200 people came for a session organized by the embassy that brought together experts and newbies, both young and old.
Great deal of excitement, great deal of interest in Yoga Day. And I think the theme of this year's Yoga Day for One Earth and One Health brings together the importance of preserving our environment and preserving our health. And yoga, I think, is a key.
Also at the event was Indonesian singer Mikha Tambayong, a yoga enthusiast who came to represent the Ministry of Youth and Sport.
I think yoga is much more than just practicing movements and,